I think a lot of people have been missing something that's just buried in all this launch coverage of all the new Valve stuff. Also, in addition to the Steam Frame VR device, the Steam Machine, and the Steam Controller announcements today, there's also some more information about the Steam Deck 2, and AMD is also launching a new gaming CPU today, Ryzen 5 7500X3D for $269 with some performance claims and some third-party benchmarks out already. And we also have some AMD future roadmaps. We have PlayStation gaming monitor with controller charging built in. There's a lot of stuff to talk about here. Obviously, the biggest news today, though, is the Steam Frame and Steam Machine. Let's talk about those. And oh man, today was a bad day to have jury duty, so my video is coming out super late, and I'm very tired, but there's a lot I really want to talk about here. Because, like I said, okay, Steam, new VR headset, there's a lot that's really cool about that, but I think what's getting really buried here is the fact that this is an ARM device that is running Steam OS, and not only is it running Steam OS, it can play some of your Steam library. And I don't just mean Steam VR games, and I don't mean games built for ARM devices. This is a Steam OS device running your Steam library on an ARM-based chip. That is an absolutely massive development. Now, with that being said, I imagine that the perfectly supported game list is going to be rather small now, but will grow in the future. And this is a really big deal. Valve has had to put in a ton of work into an emulation layer to work to make this work. But this is so cool. Like, think about this long term. This means that future SteamOS devices can be running ARM hardware. That's massive, right? Like, could a future Steam Deck actually have like an ARM-based CPU with an NVIDIA GPU or something in it? I'm not saying I expect that for the Steam Deck 2, more on some Steam Deck 2 stuff in a minute, but that's the kind of groundwork that is being laid by this type of software development. Remember, Valve kind of failed at their first attempt at Steam machines, which is the other big news here, where, the gaming on Linux wasn't quite there. That wasn't the only issue with it the first time they tried, but their Steam Deck has been massively successful. I really enjoy mine, and in many ways, gaming on it is better than gaming on Windows. However, there's still some downsides. Like, for example, games where the anti-cheat doesn't work properly, which if I'm looking for downsides to the Steam machine, that's definitely going to be one of them. But the point is, Valve had to put in many years of work in that Proton translation layer to get those Windows-based games to run well on Linux. And for the most part, the vast majority of the Steam library now works extremely well on Linux. This feels like the beginnings of that for ARM-based devices. And again, I think that the long-term implications of that are getting completely buried in the announcements of these actual hardware devices themselves. That being said, we should talk at least a little bit about the hardware devices. So this looks, by all means, to be a very interesting VR headset. I haven't had a VR headset for a while. I had an Oculus Quest or MetaQuest 2 for a while. I think it was still called Oculus at first at the time. I can't remember at this point. Played some Half-Life Alyx. Eventually just wasn't using it that much. But I'm tempted to get this. There's a couple of big things. The biggest thing that other devices aren't doing yet is foveated streaming. So we've seen other VR devices with foveated rendering, where your eye looks is rendered at a higher resolution, and there's built-in eye tracking that's so fast that you can't really see the problem. So you get better performance because it's only having to render a high resolution where your eyes are actually looking. But since this is going to be a device that could connect to a gaming PC and stream from that more powerful device, in addition to as another option versus running natively on its ARM chip built into the device. So you could play games on the ARM chip built in, which is really cool, but you could also connect to a gaming PC. And they're giving their own wireless adapter with its built-in, signal connection, which I think is a really big deal as well, because I think that can be a bit hit or miss if you're going through a Wi-Fi router. Some people have better Wi-Fi connections than others. And so some of the other devices, like Quest devices that do the streaming to the gaming PC wirelessly, I think, like I said, it can be kind of hit or miss on your connection. By having this dedicated device that just plugs into your USB, I think is going to help make that be a solid connection for the vast majority of users. My only question about this is I haven't seen anybody able to test it going through walls yet. Sometimes 6 gigahertz connections aren't as good as like 5 gigahertz connections at traveling through walls. So if you're somebody whose gaming PC is in a completely different room, maybe in like a small office, but you like to use your VR devices in a large living room, but there's walls or maybe a different level of the house or something like that in a multi-story building, you could see how that could potentially be a concern, but that's just something to keep an eye on once these actually launch and we get some dedicated reviews. I'm sure people will be checking that out. But again, if your connection to the PC is wireless, obviously you could get bad streaming and then it just doesn't look as good, right? Well, the idea here is not just do foveated rendering, it will do that, but also foveated streaming, where all of the bit rate in your stream can target the part of the stream you're actually viewing. And again, it can adjust that in real time extremely quickly. And again, all of the hands-on impressions we've seen seem to show that working very, very well, at least in the demo environment that they were in. So that seems like a really big deal. If this just makes the streaming basically feel like you're plugged in directly, that's awesome. And like I said, there's some other really cool stuff about the hardware as well. This has pancake lenses, which should work pretty well here. So I clicked on that and it's scrolling through the different things. I accidentally went to the next slide apparently. It's 2160 by 2160 LCD panels. It is LCD, not OLED, so you're not gonna get those perfect blacks, but this should help other aspects to the image with like motion clarity and brightness and things like that. And apparently 72 to 144 hertz on that display. So all of that looks pretty cool. It also looks cool how it can like separate these pieces out. So it looks like there could be the potential for upgrades and attachments and all sorts of things in the future with all of that. Again, this running SteamOS is really cool. It seems like the audio also has a lot of nice touches to it. The overall design seems to be good. This is inside-out tracking, so unlike the previous Valve Index, you won't have the little light boxes monitoring you around the room. You just have the headset and the controllers. And so, yeah, it looks like it should be a much more convenient device to use. They've talked about the quality of the thumbsticks, triggers. One of the big deals with the controllers is that they're designed to play just normal games, not just VR games. So you have all of the same buttons that you would have on your normal, PlayStation or Xbox style controller. Again, because of the idea that you could be using this as just a display to play normal Steam games, not just VR games. Your VR gives you a large screen in front of you to then play a normal game on. That seems to be a big target here, is letting you play the whole Steam library, which again, the fact that you could be running that natively, well, I mean, there's some translation and emulation happening there, so I don't know if native is the right word, but running on ARM-based hardware on this actual device with standalone play, running SteamOS on, again, a Snapdragon 8 processor, I think that is a really, really big deal for the future of SteamOS. I think that could be a really big deal. Anyway, overall, I think that's enough detail for my channel since we're not super VR focused, but I will say I'm excited enough about this that if the price isn't ridiculous, I am probably going to buy one just because it just looks so cool. Anyway, I do hope that we're also getting, I don't need to get into my whole thoughts on VR. This video is going to get way too long if we get into that. Anyway, I'm just hoping that we continue to get good game support and all of that. You know, what's Half-Life 3? Our previous Half-Life game, Alex, was VR. Like, we've seen a lot of stuff about Half-Life 3, you know, potentially being real soon. Is that going to be another VR game, you know, follow-up, all of that? But yeah, this seems like a very, very interesting device. But more in line with this channel is the Steam Machine, since this is a gaming PC. Now, it's clearly a gaming PC that while you could hook up a mouse and keyboard and use it on a desktop, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't do that. It also seems to be very targeted at playing games on the big screen. In other words, this is a PC device, but it also seems to be positioned more like a console competitor than the typical gaming PC is. And I am so excited for this. Not only do I love the design, and I'm loving everybody calling this the Gabe Cube for Gabe Newell, but also they have to make a companion cube because this front plate can pop off and be customized. There needs to be a companion cube version of this. Like if Valve hasn't done that themselves, they're missing such a huge opportunity to sell those. Anyway, but let's talk more about this. I think so much about this, I think is designed to completely solve all of my issues with using my gaming PC on my TV. Because quite frankly, the PS5 is just so much easier to use as a TV gaming device than my PC is. Now, my PC is way more powerful, so I'll often choose to use it anyway. And I think that's the main downside of the Steam Machine is it's not way more powerful than what you'd get from something like a PS5. But I do think that it's going to be more convenient like that, which is really nice. So the idea here is just that you can now play your Steam games on your TV running SteamOS. It's a small form factor. They're very clear that it's designed to fit into a 6-inch style, height for like if you're putting it in an entertainment center, trying to have it be right under your TV, that kind of thing. All the coverage of the cooling and everything makes it sound very well designed. Now, I was initially a little bit scared when I saw it was HDMI 2.0, but that appears to not actually be a problem. It has all of the main things you want from HDMI 2.1, which is it can go 4K 120. It's not limited to 4K 60. It does have FreeSync compatibility, so you get your variable refresh rate, which again, HDMI 2.0 usually doesn't get you. And it does have HDR. So it should go 4K HDR 120 with variable refresh rate. They're just calling it HDMI 2.0, I think due to the fact that I think it's missing just a tiny bit of the HDMI 2.1 spec. And I think there's also, I saw some comments mentioning something about like some kind of AMD and Linux and HDMI 2.1 like licensing or branding or something to get that. Anyway, so I think it's missing things like the display stream compression to go above 4K 120 that like I think a normal HDMI 2.1 could do and all of that. But it has the main things you would want to fit with a high-end TV. Most high-end TVs, 4K 120 HDR with variable refresh rate, should do the job. So that's good. And then you can get the DisplayPort 1.4 if you're plugging into a monitor for some even higher refresh rates and all that. So that's good. Now, they're marketing this as 4K gaming at 60 FPS, and that's the part where I'm like, okay, really? And they do even say with FSR, so they're acknowledging that not many games are going to be rendering at 4K 60 natively here. But the GPU in this thing is essentially an RX 7600, except worse. So it's not super powerful in the GPU space. The CPU, on the other hand, does seem pretty solid. So really, I mean, very clearly many games, especially in all the like indie style games that I play on my Steam Deck, I have a feeling this absolutely will run at 4K 60. Like this is probably going to be playing Hades 2 at 4K 60 and look great. But yeah, if you're playing the latest UE5 title, I have a feeling that you'd be better off targeting like a 1080p or 1440p output and still using FSR just to get there. And speaking of FSR, it's an RDNA 3 based GPU, not RDNA 4. So there's some questions regarding FSR 4 support. more on that in a minute. Let's finish the rest of the specs here, and then we'll talk a little more about that. So the storage, 12 gigabytes and 2 terabyte options with expandable storage via micro SD card. And that's pretty interesting too, because from everything I've seen in the coverage, it looks like, you could have games on your Steam Deck, put in an SD card, copy the games to the SD card, put this SD card into your Steam machine, and now you could get your games on there. And even if you're transferring them back to the SSD, that seems like it should be designed to function really smoothly like that, which is nice. And then the power brick is built into the device, which is a really big deal for certain setups. But for other people's setups, it's like, could kind of take it or leave it. But a lot of mini PCs, have a separate power brick. This doesn't, which could be kind of nice. But connectivity options, not only does it have 2x2 Wi-Fi 6E, which is nice, and Bluetooth 5.3, with a dedicated antenna. What I really like is that they have a Steam controller's wireless adapter built into the Steam machine for direct pairing. And I think this is a really big deal. And in the coverage I've seen, I think they said up to 4 controllers for Steam controllers connecting directly to that. This is one of the places where I think that this is better than a traditional gaming PC. A lot of gaming PCs, if you start trying to connect multiple Bluetooth controllers, you're going to start running into some problems connectivity-wise. Whereas having this Steam controller built directly into it, I think is actually a really big deal. Also, there's an LED strip, so there you go. You got to buy one. Anyway, but I think that, in my opinion, what could be a big deal here is, as I understand it, especially because the HDMI does also have, CEC support, where things can be controlled, like if you have, your AV receiver, your TV, and then your console, or in this case, your Steam machine, you should then be able to kind of control those devices through that HDMI. And they're saying that the HDMI 2.0 does support that CEC. So here's what I'm looking for. I would really like this to be able to function like how I have my PS5 set up right now, which is if I turn on my PS5 with the PS5 controller, it not only just turns on the PS5, but it also wakes up my TV and my AV receiver. Everything just turns on instantly. I'm right back into my game. I have mentioned in previous videos that it's annoying to me that my Windows gaming PC, that might be the most powerful gaming PC you can buy, 5090, 9800X3D, etc., just can't do that kind of convenience functionality that my PS5 can. So this is clearly not going to be as powerful as you could build a custom gaming PC if you just throw money at it. But if it solves some of those convenience issues, that's going to be awesome, because there's some games that I'm actually tempted to buy the PS5 version just because, like, I want to play it on my TV, like in maximum convenience mode. But then I have issues with, like, okay, and then that might not cross-save with my Steam library if I'm playing on there. So to me, I definitely see there being a market for, I want to just play my Steam games in a convenient way, but in the TV setup. I want to just push the button on the controller, everything wakes up, and I'm instantly back into that game that I suspended 3 days ago, And right now my PC is just not that. So I think that that's really cool. So anyway, there's tons I love about this, but the GPU is looking a bit on the weak side. So the GPU is RDNA 3 based 28 CUs, 2.45 gigahertz max sustained clock, 110 watt TDP, with 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. The overall system will also have 16 gigabytes of DDR5, and the CPU is a Zen 4 6-core 12-thread, so sounding kind of like a Ryzen 5 7600X or so, but it is coming in with a 30-watt TDP and up to 4 gigahertz clock. So 30-watt TDP would certainly make this performance-wise, I don't think able to match like a 7600X, but that being said, I do think that this is a place where everything I see about this tells me it's probably better CPU for gaming than what you're seeing in like a PlayStation 5, which is gaming performance-wise more along the lines of like a Ryzen 5 3600. this, newer architecture, et cetera, I think should be able to outperform something like a PS5 in raw power. Again, sometimes console games just get more optimization thrown at them. But another thing that this should help with is, a lot of times when I'm gaming on my Windows gaming PC, I have to deal with shader compilation stutter. Well, the SteamOS, being Linux and handling all these things, I'll say is that generally shader compilation is a solved issue in SteamOS games. So I think that, there's a lot of really cool stuff about this. Again, CPU looks pretty solid. That GPU, the 7600 can, and this is a little bit weaker than that, can definitely play any game out there, even Unreal Engine 5 games, the latest games. There is not a single game that you can't play on this. It's just going to be a matter of graphics settings. I think, medium graphics settings and then target like a 1080p or 1440p output with some upscaling in the heavier ones. You can maybe do native 4K or upscale to 4K when you're playing the older games, etc. But you're not getting a ton of power here. This is going to be weaker than an RTX 4060. And again, RDNA 3, if we had RDNA 4 here, and AMD probably just didn't have the right offerings here to offer Valve when they're, developing all of this. So RDNA 3 doesn't have our current version of FSR4 natively supported. That being said, we have seen the leaked Int 8 version of FSR4 running just fine on RDNA 3. I've tested that on my channel, and using something like Optiscaler, you can put that into just about any game that has DLSS or XeSS or FSR 2 or higher, and then you can get that in there. So that's really cool. What would be nice, though, is if we got some kind of official support for RDNA 3 on some version of FSR4 before the actual launch of the Steam machine. And it's possible that Valve knows something we don't. Now, these are targeted at a Q1 2026 launch, and AMD is supposed to be telling us about FSR Redstone in the second half of 2025, which we're getting to the end of 2025 here. We should be hearing about this soon, hopefully. Now, Redstone is going to be a lot of things, but this could potentially be a time where if AMD is going to bring out something like an Int 8 version of FSR4 that does have compatibility with RDNA 3 officially, then that might be the time to bring that out, right? So in other words, it's possible we could get some kind of machine learning-based AI upscaler with RDNA 3 compatibility in time before the Steam machines are really out there. It would be really nice. We can't guarantee that'll be the case, though. Now, are these going to be worth it? Well, we don't have a price point, and that's going to be make it or break it, right? If one of these came out at $399, I would say if anybody's looking for a budget gaming PC, and my only hang up other than recommend this would just be, well, if you're playing multiplayer titles where Linux is an issue, I mean, I guess you could install Windows on this, and then maybe that solves that problem anyway for those specific games, right? Because running SteamOS, some anti-cheats for some competitive games can be a bit of an issue. But if this came out at $399, I'm right there. I think that'd even compete well with being a console alternative. Now, all we've seen on pricing is that Valve has mentioned, it'd be priced like an entry-level gaming PC. So if we're starting to push out into $500, $600, $700, $800, $1,000, there's points at which it's well, I could just build a much better gaming PC for the money. That being said, I think in the $500 to $600 range, this is still going to be very competitive specs with the kind of gaming PC that you could actually build at that price point. But I do think it'll be harder to get the console market to switch over, because the Steam Deck coming in with an aggressive price point at $399, I think some people who had previously been a console player might grab that, right? And I think we've seen some inroads there. If they're trying to make this a direct console competitor, you got to compete with PS5 pricing. And so, and in many ways, the PS5 might play the latest AAA games better because, well, the PS5 has a weaker CPU. It has access to more VRAM and just console-specific optimizations and things. Be a little easier to use, plug and play, like the games just have graphic settings that work, theoretically. Anyway, so there's all that. Anyway, now, if we're thinking about value, though, I was thinking, like, if I threw in, a Ryzen, a Radeon 7600X, which is, again, the closest GPU we have to this. It's actually, this is a little bit weaker than that. And then just threw together, like, the cheapest everything I possibly could, like, not even matching the CPU, just the cheapest everything. What kind of price do we come in at? And actually, we come in at like over $500. So this is what I did. So I threw together, so a Ryzen 5 5500 is a weaker CPU than what we're seeing in the Steam machine. I just searched PC Part Picker for the least expensive compatible motherboard, which is not offering the kind of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and, direct Steam controller connection or anything like that. And I just grabbed the least expensive 16 gigabyte 2x8 kit of RAM that I could throw in here. And again, this is DDR4 RAM, whereas the Steam machine is DDR5 RAM. RAM has got annoyingly expensive right now. But anyway, I threw in the cheapest 512 gigabyte NVMe drive that I could find on PC Part Picker. I threw in the least expensive Radeon RX 7600 that I could find on PC Part Picker. I threw in the least expensive case I could find on PC Part Picker, and I put in the least expensive power supply that I could find on PC Part Picker, which, to be clear, I would never put in a PC I was actually building. What I'm trying to do here is just go least expensive everything that's still on a somewhat modern platform, still not as good as what's in there, and has slightly better but the closest equivalent GPU. And we're at like $550. So realistically, if I look at this gaming PC, especially with the quality of like power supply and things I'm getting here, and there's no way this build is going to look as nice or anything like that. I think compared to this, I'd rather have the Steam machine. It has a better platform, better wireless connectivity, a better CPU, similar GPU, probably better build quality than the components that we're getting in some of this stuff, right? So I think it's at least competitive value-wise up to the $600 or so range. As we start to get past that, it's like, okay, what if I started to actually try to compete with the CPU that's actually in it, right? So I'm still going to go with this. This power supply is making me nervous. This is a theoretic. Please don't actually build this, guys. This is a thought experiment, just talking about value, right? So if I get a Ryzen 7600, looks like the X and non-X are basically the same price right now. X is slightly, this one will actually come with a box cooler, which is probably noisier than the fan that you're getting on the Steam machine, by the way. Anyway, and then let's put in just the least expensive motherboard, sort price low to high. We've got the $80 there. And then we'll go the least expensive 2x8. But now we're going DDR5 memory. Again, only 16 gigabytes, but DDR5 prices have gone through the roof. Yeah, this is only going to be DDR5 4800. That's $85 right now. Yeah, this gets us to $700. So this is closer to matching the Steam machine. Now, I think this is actually slightly more powerful on the CPU because, again, this is going to be higher power draw limits on a similar, core and thread count and architecture generation. And again, this GPU is going to be slightly better than what's in there. So slightly but faster CPU, slightly faster GPU. I would say probably lower quality power supply, I would imagine. I doubt this build would look as nice. And then, like I said, I think we're missing the Wi-Fi features and things like that. But we're somewhat comparable here at like $700. So, like I said, if the Steam machine comes out at like $399, I think that this thing could just take the market by storm, but I'm just not sure that's realistic pricing. $500-600, I think it's still potentially good value. $700, I think it's at least... like I said, you could build a similar PC. Hopefully Valve can get better deals on everything because, you can bulk purchase all of that. So it would be nice if they could come in well below $700 so that I could basically just say, yeah, I couldn't really compete with that at that price. Now, that being said, watch this one change to the build. If I change the 7600 to the similarly priced 9060 XT, even just the 8 GB version, that's coming in at $270 right now. Suddenly, this GPU is way more powerful than the one they've got in there. It's still only 8 GB of VRAM, but also has the FSR4 support, etc. And we're only up another like $20 here. So just something to think about. So I'm really curious where this comes in value-wise. Now, this video is getting super long, so let's go ahead and kind of be quick here. The Steam controller also looks great. It's essentially all the controls and double trackpads and things that you get off of the Steam Deck. This looks infinitely better than the original Steam controller, which I did buy, but just not having the right joystick just killed it. This seems to have better haptic feedback than what you get in the actual Steam Deck, so really cool stuff. Speaking of the Steam Deck, is there a Steam Deck 2 incoming? The answer is that they just don't feel like the SoCs that are available right now are enough of a jump at the same power target compared to what they already have. So this is a direct quote from Valve. This was IGN asking them about this at this launch event for all these other products, saying, Valve's response being, we're not interested in getting to a point where it's 20 or 30 or even 50% more performance at the same battery life. Again, they're focused on the same battery life. We want something a little bit more demarcated than that. So we've been working back from silicon advancements and architectural improvements, and I think we have a pretty good idea of what the next version of Steam Deck is going to be. But right now, there's no offerings in that landscape, in the SoC landscape, that we think would truly be a next-gen performance Steam Deck. So the point is, if they want to blow the Steam Deck performance out of the water, they need something that draws lots more power, which they don't want. So they just need more energy efficiency advancements. And, hopefully by then, if they're still going with AMD, we'll have like RDNA 4, RDNA 5 type stuff available that would have like FSR4 support, things like that. So seems like they're just holding out till it's a bigger generational leap than what you could get right now. Now, pricing on all of this stuff we don't have, and I'm wondering if part of that is due to the fact that RAM prices are just still going out of control. We have Asus warning now that some of their products may have to get a lot more expensive if RAM prices continue going up. But the other big hardware launch today is the Ryzen 5 7500X3D, launching at $269. This is a 6-core CPU with 3D V-cache. AMD claiming that it's on average in a broad sample of games, 13% faster than their competitor, Core Ultra 245KF in gaming. But you don't have to take their word for it. There are some third-party reviews right now. Not a lot, though. And I didn't see any Hardware Unboxed or Gamers Nexus, but usually my go-to CPU reviews. These seem a little bit more limited, which is kind of interesting. Now, we already had a 7600X3D. The idea here is I think this one will be more widely available, where the 7600X3D was more region specific, and spec wise it's a just 2 gigahertz drop to the max clock, but still gets you the big cache, which helps a lot with gaming performance. If we click on one of these reviews, again, I would encourage you to look at their whole review, but just glancing at a couple of games, you can see that it performs where you would expect it to, which is just slightly below the 7600X3D, which is again a little bit below the 7800X3D, but that these are frequently performing above all of the non-X3D counterparts in the lineup, which is interesting. But I mean, that's in games that benefit from the cache, but a lot of them do. In some games, some Intel CPUs can take the lead, but definitely not in all. So anyway, it does look like a very potent gaming processor. We'll have to see what supply actually looks like, what availability looks like, how the price stabilizes on the actual market, but this could be a very interesting gaming processor if the price is right on the real market. And try to finish up quickly and just mention that AMD has listed next-gen AI and ray tracing for future Radeon GPUs. Now, that doesn't really mean much. In other words, we saw a GPU roadmap coming in from AMD. They just had their financial analyst day. But really, they're just saying that their next-gen is focused on next-gen AI and ray tracing. So we've already kind of known that that was their focus, but they're just continuing to outline that and double down and say, that's what the next generation of AMD GPU is designed to do. AI and ray tracing improvements. We also saw a roadmap for upcoming CPUs, and once again, the focus seems to be AI. So we've seen, we've already had Zen 4, and then we see the move to Zen 5, Zen 6, Zen 7, and what you can see here, especially as we look at Zen 6 and Zen 7, is Zen 6 bringing new AI data type support, more AI pipelines, and Zen 7 with new matrix engine and AI data format expansion. So basically AMD saying AI, 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 AI. And I also saw this today, so let's throw it in. PlayStation 27-inch gaming monitor. It's 1440p, 240 hertz, and can charge your DualSense controller. I do find it a little bit interesting that it's a 1440p monitor specifically targeting gaming on a PlayStation, since to my knowledge, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the PlayStation, even if you plug it into a lower than 4K res display, still kind of doesn't run the game any faster, if you know what I mean, like to benefit from rendering at a lower resolution. I think it's actually still just rendering 4K and then downscaling, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe one of you knows more than me there. Anyway, this video is very long. I'm tired, and hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. I hope all of you have an excellent day.